Hi, greetings, it's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this video is dedicated to being an effective communicator. So, of course, the videos all in this series are all about helping you be the most effective leader and manager that you possibly could be. And in this video, it's an essential skill, and there's a lot of different dynamics that you may already know and could probably use a refresher on. So let's get right into this video. Today we're going to talk about the advantages of two-way communication. We're going to identify communication problems to avoid. I'm going to share a lot of vocabulary words with you, as I always do, as it relates to various communication models and channels. And we're going to talk about being a better sender and receiver of information, and how to improve upward and downward and horizontal communication, and talk about grapevines and other aspects of communication. So let's get right into this. So what is communication? To understand why communication efforts sometimes break down and find ways to improve communication skills, it really helps to identify the elements of the communication process itself. Communication is the transmission of information and meaning from one person to another through the use of what we call shared symbols. So there's communication that's one way, which is a process in which information flows in from one direction, or that way, from the sender to the receiver with no feedback loop. And then, of course, two-way communication is simply a process in which information flows in two directions. The receiver provides the feedback and the sender is receptive to the feedback. So a general mode of communication points out that there can be breakdowns in communication, and mistakes can be made at each stage in communication, and a manager who is alert to potential problems can perform each step carefully to ensure more effective communication. And so we're talking about person A, the sender, where they have an intended meaning. It goes through a communication channel, and maybe it's verbal or maybe it's written. And then there's decoding that takes place by the receiver or person B, and they have a perceived meaning, and then they must give feedback back. I'm a big fan of paraphrasing things back to show the sender that you have truly understood the message, or what you received with the message, which gives the original sender of the message an opportunity to say, yes, you got that right, thank you for confirming. So in one-way communication, information flows in one direction from the receiver to the receiver with no feedback loop. A manager can send an email to a subordinate without asking for a response. An employee phones the information technology department and leaves a message requesting repairs for her computer, and a supervisor yells at a production worker about defects and then storms away. Does communication, one-way communication, sound like it truly is effective? Well, who knows? So having that feedback come in is important. So again, one-way communication is when the sender has a meaning to communicate and then encodes that meaning into symbols. Then the sender transmits the message through some channel. Then the receiver decodes the message and interprets it, and whatever the meaning is, to that person, and then the receiver may provide feedback to the sender by encoding a message in response. So that's one-way communication. So with one-way communication, there is often something called noise, and noise blocks perfect understanding. Noise could be anything that interferes with accurate communication, ringing telephones, thoughts about other things, for instance. Simple fatigue or stress can be noise. At times, noise can derail your message. Just imagine your boss asking your boss for a raise on the same day that she receives a below-average performance review. No matter how effectively you present your case, the likelihood of receiving an affirmative answer is low. So, It really is important to understand how noise works, and that there will be a communication breakdown if there is noise involved. So mistakes can be reached at and made at every level. So some kind of interference, blocking perfect understanding, is noise. And those examples of noise: ringing telephones, thoughts about other things, or fatigue or stress, for instance. There are some communication pitfalls, including perception and filtering. People's perceptual and filtering process create misinterpretation. Perception is the process of receiving and interpreting information. Such processes are not perfectly objective. They are subjective because people's self-interested motives and attitudes toward the sender and the message bias their interpretations. People assume that others share their views and naturally pay more attention to their own views than the views of other people. But perceptual differences get in the way of consensus. To remedy the situation, it helps to remember that other people's points of view truly are legitimate, and you should incorporate other people's perspectives into your interpretation of issues. Generally, adopting another person's viewpoint is fundamental to working collaboratively, and your ability to take others' perspectives into account, really understanding and valuing their perspectives, these can improve your own performance. Filtering is the process of withholding information or distorting information. And senders do this, for example, when they tell the boss that they think the boss wants to hear, or give unwarranted compliments rather than an honest criticism. Receivers also filter information, and they may fail to recognize an important message, or may attend to some aspects of the message but not others. So perception is the process of receiving and interpreting information, and then filtering is the process of withholding, ignoring, or distorting information. So let's talk about communication flows through different channels. There's oral communication, for instance, and that includes face-to-face discussions, telephone conversations, informal presentations, and speeches. And then there's written communication, which includes texts, emails, memos, letters, reports, computer files, and other written documents. So choosing the right channel for your message truly is important. So let's talk about that a little bit. So depending on the situation, which channel are you going to use? If you want to ask your boss for a raise, this probably would be best for a face-to-face channel. Some tips are: observe nonverbal communication. Rehearse what you want to say and ask when she's in a good mood. So say you want to remind coworkers to attend a meeting. Probably the best channel would be to send a text message or an email. And some tips about this is: provide date, times, location, and why their attendance matters. If you want to introduce a new product to a key customer, present the information through multiple channels. So face-to-face, email announcement, social media. Relay information using multiple times, and review how to effectively communicate with your potential customers. So most tools for electric communication fall into a category called Web 2.0. And we use this term to discuss a set of internet-based applications that encourage user-provided content and collaboration. Most widely used Web 2.0 applications include social networking, podcasts, really simple syndication or RSS, and blogs, and wikis. And so it really depends on what your philosophy is and the philosophy of your customers. Not everybody is on the internet, believe it or not. So the amount of information a medium conveys is called media richness. And the more information or cues a medium sends to the receiver, the richer the medium is. The richest media are the most personal, are more personal than technological, providing quick feedback and allowing descriptive language and sending different types of cues. Face-to-face communication is the richest medium, which offers a variety of cues in addition to words, tone, voice, facial expressions, body language, and nonverbal signals. So here's some tips to make a more formal presentation more powerful. Spend adequate time on the content of your presentation. Clearly understand the objective of your presentation. Tell the audience the purpose of the presentation. Provide meaning, not just data, and then practice. Perfect practice makes perfect, so it really is important. I've taught communication classes where I grade people on how effective their speeches are. And you can always tell someone who's rehearsed it versus someone who's just throwing something together in the last minute. So it really is important if you want to get the message across, to practice it. Some more tips are: remember that a presentation is more like a conversation than a speech. Remember the incredible power of eye contact. Allow yourself to be imperfect. Be prepared to answer tough questions, and provide a crisp wrap-up to a question and answer session. So summarize things, in other words. So nonverbal signals convey meaning too. It really is important to make sure you're using time appropriately. Make sure that whatever environment that you're in really is conducive to effective communication. And I believe one of the most powerful communicators is your body language. So be aware of your body language. Give good eye contact. Make sure that you have an open body language for people to see, and you're giving the right impression. So be aware of body contact. Receivers truly can improve their listening, reading, and observational skills, and reflecting is so important. This is the process in which a person states what he or she believes the other person is saying. So if I heard you right, Bob, you're telling me this. Did I get that right? So 10 keys for effective listening are: find an area of interest, judge content, not delivery, hold your fire, listen for ideas, be flexible, resist distraction, exercise your mind, keep your mind open, capitalize on thought speed, and then work at listening. We must be effective communicators and capable of observing and interpreting nonverbal communications. For example, by reading nonverbal cues, a presenter can determine how her talk is going and then adjust her approach necessary. So it really is important to observe what other people are doing as you're speaking. It gives you a clue, and then the key is really being accurate in interpreting what you observe. So let's talk about directions of communication. It's kind of a simple lesson, but downward communication is information that flows from higher levels in the organization's hierarchy. So therefore, maybe your boss is talking to you, or the vice president 2 layers above you may have communication they're expressing. Upward communication is information that flows from lower to higher levels in the organization hierarchy. You need to share something with your boss, or you need to go to a vice president or the president for something. And then horizontal communication is information shared among people in the same hierarchical level, your peers. So information is lost in downward communication. So this is really interesting to understand. So at the very top, if you are the executive board and you're talking, a vision is being created, probably 100% of the people are getting that. But when it goes down to the vice presidents, there's a 37% loss. You know, whatever the presidents and the executive board are saying to the vice presidents, you can count on only about 63% of that message is being captured. And then one more level down to the general managers, there's about a 44% loss. And then one more level down to plant managers, for instance, and there's a 60% loss. And then one more level down to supervisors, and then there's a 70% loss. And finally, down to the people who are actually working with your valuable customers or on the floor creating the products for their customers, there's an 80% loss. So that's a lot of losses. So we need to be aware of informal communication or grapevine communication. And that essentially is a social network of informal communication that will always take place behind the scenes. It provides people with information, it helps people solve problems, and it teaches people how to do their work successfully. So it really is important to make sure that you understand the value of informal communication. Managing informal communication is when a manager hearing a story that could get out of hand. That person should go talk to key people involved to get the facts on their perspectives. It really is important to dispel uncertainties by providing facts and establish open communications and trust over time. And then a manager should neutralize room once they get started. I always like to think about the communication game where you whisper in somebody's ear and then the message gets passed down. So this is a challenge that happens in almost every kind of organization, and so we have to be aware of how that works. So we really need to make sure that as we communicate that the message truly is getting across to the intended people, being able to paraphrase, focus on the facts, being aware of how we say things, the tone of voice, the volume, the medium that we choose or the channel, and then choosing the right words to get the message across. All matters. And of course, paraphrasing things back helps make sure that we understand whether or not our message was truly received. Well, that in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, is my lecture on communication. I hope you've taken something away, and I hope you found something of value to this. And even more importantly, I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm